I don't know, do we have any outside people dialing in?
No hands raised.
Thank you. So, and I don't expect anybody to probably be dialing in, given that this is a little bit different time frame, different agenda. And with that said, I want to get going here. We have a lot, I mean, a lot to cover, everybody. And, but I just need to take 2 minutes and thank all of you, because the last several months, we have all kind of talked about having a training session or workshop session. And, you know, Elizabeth, you're awesome. I mean, I know way too much at you. You've never given me flack back. You never, and I look at this agenda and I'm like, holy cow, she caught everything that I've thrown your way. And I don't see you writing stuff down, so that's just kudos to you. That you're good. So
Thank you to Peggy for recording us, so I can go back and remember.
Exactly. So with that being said, everybody, we have another meeting in a couple weeks. Okay, and I guess as acting chair, I get to put the agenda together for 2 weeks from now. So whatever we don't get done today, let's make sure we spend the appropriate time on each category. Because but let's not overdo it either, because we could literally go today for the next 8 hours and probably not finish. So let's get going, but just know that there's something really important, near and dear to everybody's heart. Let's spend a little extra time on that, okay? I told Elizabeth I love the agenda, everything she did, but there's no way in heck are we gonna get this thing done in the time allotted. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts they'd like to? Yeah.
No, I'm just glad we're doing this.
Anybody but Andrew? Does anybody have any? No.
No, you guys can, if you don't finish, do another workshop. Just
Yeah,
do
no,
an extra
no.
meeting
We-
and finish your training separate from your
We
business
just talked
meetings.
about it.
Right.
Yeah, we
Right.
talked
Right,
about
and yeah, I
It's
think
simple.
thinking about how we structure our meetings going forward, I think is a topic that we wanna discuss anyway. So yeah, I think the most of today, you know, we'd like to dedicate to going over that 10-year plan, our strategic action plan, and pulling priorities out of that, where we wanna focus going forward. And then if we have time, we can talk about, you know, we'll touch on some of the structural issues that I anticipate that are gonna affect the board going forward. And we can talk about board governance, the roundtable, meeting structure, making sure we're productive and how we're gonna get all this work
it.
done.
And it's perfect timing because we have a whole new leadership team, other members probably coming on board in July, right? So it's perfect timing to just align everything in the appropriate order going
Right.
for moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, to, you know, speaking to our current operations, you know, we don't have a major project that we're dug into right now. We obviously have our 2 programs, rental assistance program, which is well-funded, you know, being run through, HAC, you know, going well. Homeownership emergency assistance, I know we want to focus on this one going forward, that Hetch is administering for us. We're sort of at the end of our encumbered budget. So definitely something we want to come back and revisit. You know, we have 2 sort of active projects, Governor Prince, which we're taking a more passive role in. Obviously, we've sort of acted as the bank for that one, but they're coming in front of the zoning board. So we'll talk about that in the future, and trying to wrap up 22 Old Tote Road. Obviously, we can check off as accomplishments at this point our condo at 24 Old Colony, 107 Main Street, and our Habitat House at Quonset Road. We have 2 active solicitations out, one for development projects to fund units in private development projects. Have had some conversation with the Underground Mall about this, but have yet to see an application. And then obviously our land acquisition RFP that we did in support of Old Tote Road, but is there, and, you know, I think we should revisit on a normal basis. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we're doing and where we're at.
Where does I don't remember what we call it, but the old firehouse?
Yeah, see, I put that one on and I took it off because I think that's sort of in limbo. It's something to say, if this is what we're gonna prioritize going forward, let's figure out if this is a trust project, like, maybe that's something we bring to the round table to figure out sort of where affordable housing, how the trust fits into that puzzle.
And Elizabeth, what about programs that are right now with, I think they're with, like the lease to locals?
Right.
The experiments that are coming out of a different corner office that this board should be aware of.
Right, so yeah.
And
I-
choose to invest in or not.
Exactly. So I think we can talk about, I think that's a great roundtable discussion, and we can sort of get into that as we are talking about our funding structure and how that's being allocated going forward. So I put this in sort of as a nod to our past chair because he loved to talk about, what is our impact on a cost per unit basis. So just as a reminder, as we prioritize going forward, we obviously do see some benefit in density and larger projects, but our strategic plan is very focused on, missing middle housing types. So the yellow orange is how much, we contributed and the percentage of what we contributed to the overall project. So, Governor Prince, we're putting in a smaller amount, but our cost per unit is across the board, our cost per unit, remains fairly steady across all of these. No, the cost per unit for all of these projects remains pretty steady, but our contributions vary widely. So again, Tom asked me to just do a quick recap. Where has our money come from at the Affordable Housing Trust? Two primary sources over time, either through general funds or free cash, initially through an override, and through the Community Preservation Act. So cumulatively, since the trust has been funded, about $2.3 million coming originally from the override. That got derailed a little bit when that override vote did not pass in May 24, and then the trust got funded with free cash at Fall Town Meeting 24. And you can see we've had a contribution from the trust, at an increasing level, or a contribution from the CPA at an increasing level since the trust was originally established this year on the warrant for Monday at a $300,000 level. So they've been fairly consistent contributors to the trust, but this year seeing sort of a fallback in support for this group and this committee. Other revenues, from other sources, we do get earnings on deposits. I took an average of the last few years. We do get a net positive out of the rent we receive from the condo we own at Old Colony. We have seen opportunities for grant revenue, and in the past we have gotten gifts and donations into the trust. Going forward, we do also anticipate that the trust will see revenue from the short-term rental community impact fee that we passed at Fall Town Meeting last year. So we just have our first quarter of revenues in there, but once we have a full year, we'll, I think, have a good idea.
Do you remember what we were in, was it about 200,000 a year at the best?
Yeah, so I think we looked at Wellfleet, and they were getting about 165, so we figured we'd probably come in less than that. But again, a good dedicated good dedicated source of revenue for the trust. So again, this is coming in from that community fee. All of our short-term rental revenues go to funding sewer here in Orleans. Some communities did allocate that to housing, and that was an option. So right now, what's coming to the trust is this additional 3% community impact fee revenue. So that's what our revenue picture looks like. Our current balance is, and I screwed that up, that should say 300. Oops, and now I can't go back. So our current balance is 1.8 million. This includes all of our encumbrances for our rental assistance program, the little that's left for our HETCH program, the $1.5 million for Governor Prince. We don't have the 165 seasonal reimbursement in the bank yet, but it's coming. But I included it here. And then, we'll be at funded at an additional $300,000 this year, assuming,
Quick question, so if you were to say these other items were sort of like liabilities, that in other words, our Governor Prince commitment,
Yeah.
then we'd be netting zero.
So, no, so this balance includes all of those
Oh,
encumbrances.
it's net of.
Correct.
Oh,
So I have accounted
I'm
for.
sorry, I thought it was gross. Sorry.
Nope, I've accounted for the 1.5 million, and I've accounted for the seasonal communities grant in there. So that's where we stand. That's where we stand right now from a budget picture. Looking ahead, again, to Andrea's point, and I think Tom and I were talking about this, the world of housing and affordable housing is changing very rapidly right now. I've been doing this a long time, and it's a new landscape. So we had looked at adding to the powers of the Affordable Housing Trust, the powers of the Year-Round Housing Trust. We tabled that warrant article after talking with town council, who said that there was not an easy way under the Seasonal Communities Act statute versus the statute that the Affordable Housing Trust is enabled under to combine those two. There are a couple of key differences, mainly related to being tax exempt and the ability for procurement of property that the Year-Round Housing Trust could not sort of opt into on their own through the seasonal communities legislation. There's an active push in the legislature to close this gap. I know Wellfleet, they have been very loud advocates with Julian Sear and others to say that small towns like ours, don't really have the capacity to be able to staff two different boards. We sort of looked at Nantucket and Provincetown that did them, but they are not like the others. So I think, at least from my perspective, and we could obviously have this conversation collectively, but I think we should be thinking about, again, how do we respond to the new opportunities that are provided under the Seasonal Community Act, mainly the ability to fund attainable housing up to 250%. So not focused as much on income, but focused on year-round occupancy, and to be able to expand preferences for essential public employees and artists. So these are new tools that we have not had before. Are these things this group takes on? How do we balance the sort of traditional low and moderate, the sort of middle ground attainable that we had been working at? We sort of bumped our AMI percentage up to 120. The prior trust was pushing to get that up to 200, and now we have this ability to go up to 250. How are we going to prioritize funding for those different buckets going forward? I think is a big question that we'll have to wrestle with.
The new AMI numbers, I believe just came out, right?
Just came out, yeah.
Did they change a lot?
So it was kind of where the median family income went down, but the persons per household income went up about 5%.
Do you remember what it is offhand for a single person in Barnstable right now in the county? Because that's a huge number for us to have in our heads.
Yes.
It's really
I don't have it, but we'll definitely
Yeah.
get it to you for the next
Meeting.
meeting. Yeah, I did that calculation.
Just heard on my Habitat meeting.
Mhm. No, it's
Yeah.
good.
Still in the 80s though.
That was 72 when I was looking at it. But that's fine.
It's high. We need to talk about the fact that those numbers are really high,
Yeah.
and that the affordable rent for a 2-bedroom unit is $2,500 at this point. It is not affordable. I end up doing a lot of sort of housing support and counseling through my job, and people are just shocked when they find out what those
I
affordable
pay less than that for a market
rates
rate
are.
rental in this town.
Right?
Yes.
So again, that's how do we balance trying to get the private market to produce housing versus some of these bigger projects that, without a voucher, you're still going to be cost burdened, definitely, if you can get into one of these.
And that's a rental.
Units.
There's no even discussion of ownership on the table.
Well, and so that's the other big problem, is that there are just no major state subsidy sources for ownership households right now. So that just that structure doesn't exist in our world. So how do we think about closing the gap in an effective way with the resources we have? Because that's what we keep hearing, is that's really the need, like single-family home ownership, completely unattainable, like I browse on Zillow every day, it is, every time there's something that comes up for $600 or $700, everyone calls me and they're like, maybe the trust wants to buy this, and I'm like,
Colony Way, it's active right now.
so.
Also, that ratio with the town's commitment, wasn't it 15% ownership and 65% rental?
On the,
On our commitment to build X number of units in the next 10 years.
I don't think we had a percentage, we had a 300, we had 150 of those had to be deed restricted affordable,
Sorry.
but we never had the.
Ownership.
We never had the ownership attainable.
Well, that's a future conversation here, isn't
Conversation.
it?
Yeah.
'Cause that's stability for families.
Yeah.
Question about this decision for, either splitting into two committees to deal with this issue, or staying as one, but figuring out how to give it equal. Who makes that decision? Do we, or does the select board, or?
Good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, I came on behalf of, I think, the town and the manager's office to talk to you about whether you were supportive of that on the warrant, and we got a positive vote of the trust to move forward. But, I think having this conversation will help frame that. And, I think we will see if that's, if that remains even an option going forward. I mean, I think on the select board level, on the manager's level, there's a very strong commitment to the seasonal communities designation and participating in these new programs, but it's going to continue, to Andrea's point, to be a conversation about how do we allocate resources between all of these different groups, and what opportunities do we want to prioritize going forward.
But also, Susan, relative to the structure, the select board, politics is everything, right? So if there's a demand for the town to meet certain needs, the select board can create the trust. But we have to work with the state. And so what we're hearing is that our plans were illegal. There was no way to deal with them until we get relief from the state.
I see.
So we can't staff two separate trusts, and legally we can't combine them. So right now, we're between a rock and a hard
Limbo.
place.
We're sort
Yeah.
of in limbo, exactly.
But I think there will be, like, there's been movement on the transfer tax. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we were told it would never happen.
Yes, so again, looking ahead, I think you guys are asking all the right questions about regionalization, about some of these bigger programs, like some of the innovative ideas here about, how do we do things like create a land trust. We have done a lot of work on that as a region in the past 5 years, so I think getting this group up to speed on our regional housing strategy, having the commission or other folks on the regional level talk to us about the strategy, the status of the transfer fee. So this is the idea of adding an additional percentage fee to high-end real estate transactions to be able to directly fund either regional or local housing efforts. So it sort of stalled out on the state level as part of the Affordable Homes Act. A lot of opposition, mostly from commercial property owners in Boston, that was never going through, but it's sort of been reframed as, could we tie this to the new seasonal communities designation? So groups that were really advocating very loudly for this, like those here on the Cape, have the ability to do this without sort of tying in that larger, Massachusetts and Boston home builder and commercial real estate market. So I haven't heard too much about that lately. I'm not even up to speed on where that is necessarily. So again, I think having the commission come in, familiarize with the tools that are in the regional housing strategy. I know there were working groups on the development of a regional land trust and, for lack of a better word, a regional redevelopment authority that would be potentially funded under the transfer fee. Making sure you guys are up to date on what those look like on a regional level, what the status is. And just knowing that, we're going to talk here about strategies, that this, one of the things that the commission provides is our sort of policy worksheets under all these different categories of different things that municipalities can do in each one of these categories. So if we are looking for sort of information on how to optimally again, implement a program or a policy in any one of these, there's a really good starting point that the commission has.
And we have
so.
inside resources. The county is also looking at, not just the commission, but the county is looking at being an agent for handing out funds for different communities to work with. But our representative to the Cape Cod Commission, lives right in town, Doug, and he would be a great person to have in to explain what's going on and then take our message back to the board.
Yeah, I love that idea.
What's Doug's last name?
From, F-R-O-M-M.
So yeah, maybe we have commission staff and Doug come in.
And the county, same thing.
Yeah, and the county, we can sort of talk about where we
John
fit
Fuller
in as
is-
part of this.
As part of that, and he created affordable housing for a
Baker.
family member.
Picture.
So,
Great.
he's a former select board member.
Oh, okay, great. So,
He's our representative of the Cape Cod Commission.
so not something I think we can cover today, because again, I'm not necessarily the expert on this, but do think, in terms of board training, making sure we look at this. I wasn't even aware of it, but as I was prepping for this, they have a whole sort of housing finance, like the world of housing finance sheet that I learned a lot from, so we can circulate those resources and think about that going forward. So sort of diving into discussion, so it's sort of just a frame, diving into the discussion on the 10-year housing plan. This was done so it's 2026. We did this back in 2023. It was an effort that was led by the Affordable Housing Committee. I don't know if who participated in that. Used funds to hire an outside consultant, Jen Goldson. I've worked with Jen before. She does these throughout the state. Very, very knowledgeable, very high level of planning. Great to have, great to see that she was involved in this, and that produced this goal of the 350 new year-round housing units, including 150 new housing units. So that was based on projections from UMass Donahue that they did as part of that report, saying that we will be short 500 to 600 year-round units by 2030, and that there's this aspect of being cost burdened, even for folks who are here, who are renting. 45% of our renters are cost burdened. A third of our homeowners are cost burdened, meaning they're paying more than they can afford in housing.
What's that percentage?
45.
45%, I think, of our renters are cost burdened. 30% of our homeowners are cost burdened. So you're paying essentially more than you can afford, and that's obviously having other impacts on your quality of life and other things you can spend money on.
Quick question, the cost burden calculation is basically their monthly expenses. So do we know how many of those people are new homeowners? Or is it people who are living in residences they've lived in for some time, but the cost of living is getting away from them?
Right. So that's what's being implied. I think that's what's implied certainly here. We don't have tons of new, new first-time homeowners here in Orleans. So yes, so we don't have that data. The data is not broken down in that way. I've dug into the cost burden data. I'll tell you, it's not great. It's not great, but it's what we have, and we all use it. We all use a consistent metric. So I think that's what's important. But yes, I think the implication is that there are folks who are here in their homes who are, the cost of living is catching up to them.
Well, I want to follow up on that I think we need to be realistic about this, that the solution is not necessarily affordable housing trust. The problem is with regards to some major policies, directions that the state is on and nationally. So I think, and those things are maybe not really in our control. I mean, the cost of electricity, what are we, second in the country?
Yeah.
So, okay, what are we doing about it? But we're
We-
not in a position to do
Right.
that.
But Fran, if we, for instance, decide in the trust that one of the things we're gonna do is assist with sprinkler systems or solar going on, or things that affect livability but aren't necessarily building housing, those are other options that can interrupt the cycle. So, yes, there's gonna always be problems that are much bigger than us, but we have local and regional action that we can take that will change the quality of life for people in Orleans.
Frankly, I don't disagree with you at all. I would maybe offer a consideration of another course, which is that we should be, as citizens and as a town, be pushing back against policies that tend to create these circumstances.
So now you're back to the Affordable Housing Committee.
Well,
The
it's a committee
advocacy.
or whatever, I mean,
Right.
and we don't have time to be
No.
lobbyists. I mean,
Well-
but I do think that eventually we get to the point where we say, okay, how did we get into this predicament? And are there things that maybe could be altered? And then you get, I understand you get into a political process, but we do have representatives, and if they hear from us that, we're not in a position to necessarily bail all these people out because we don't have the resources to change the direction that we're in on these certain categories of expenses, what can you guys do about reconsidering the path you're on?
If-
That's all I gotta say.
But a future action in a housing roundtable, if you have the Energy and Climate Action Committee, which is absolutely committed to our carbon neutral goals.
How is that lowering costs?
Because if you work with them to say, we're gonna, because they have a program called the Navigators Program, which selects residents with
Right.
resources to change things like cost of electricity. So they can assist in some of the things that are making those cost burdens a problem. We use our partners in the community because of the Housing Roundtable, to identify, here's a problem. We've identified it, we don't have the means to deal with it, but do you, as another committee or board? And the answer is yes, sometimes.
And I think maybe part of this too is that there are programs out there that a lot of people don't know
That's
about
right.
that can really impact their cost of
And they don't
living,
have time
like
to do
the
it.
fuel assistance program, and the Eversource discount plan, and then the Eversource forgiveness program, all of these things that, I know at Lower Cape Outreach, where I'm a volunteer, we often talk to clients about this and help them get set up with these things that they're not advertised, so.
And they
It's
aren't
not-
in our budget, but we
Right.
can connect the resources, that's what I'm
Exactly.
saying.
And I think a really important point is that leveraging existing programs to make them more effective, like, excuse me, I have a cold too. We're never gonna have enough funds with $2 million, we're never gonna have enough funds to close the gaps that are out there. How do we look at what programs are out there that might not be going far enough, adding to those to make them more impactful, and layering, starting to layer these benefits for people, or for projects that where, we play a role and we leverage them.
I'm cringing sitting here a little bit, and I don't want to
We've
go off
worked
on
through the
a,
agenda.
I don't want to go off on a tangent, but, we were there, the Housing Trust, when this 10-year plan was being all put together, right? We weren't the creators, but we were definitely there. However, go look, there's very little about where the revenue is gonna come from.
Well, there's nothing about where the river is.
No.
That's my point, so.
Well, very,
It's pretty, if we're gonna be held accountable to where do you stand when, I'll stop there, because we're gonna go over the hills.
No, and I mean, I think it's a great point, and something I wanted to point out, that in the Seasonal Communities Act, it identifies the potential and, the need for doing housing needs assessments up to twice per year. And ours is from 2003. Our vision statement is from 2019. So, I'm a planner. I don't want to go back to planning and not to action, but, I think we should think about collectively as a group, how do we regularly assess needs and assess opportunities across the board. Again, at the state at this point is recognizing that that could be done, you know, as frequently as twice per year. This was the vision statement that we adopted, you know, when I dug into this. It looks like it was adopted based on select board goals that were put in place in 2019. So it might be time to freshen some of this up based on
One
these
comment about the
conversations.
financing is that wasn't an oversight, that was deliberate, that financing was not included in this because it was a can of worms that we couldn't simply address at the time, and it didn't really mitigate one way or another what it was that we wanted to accomplish, goal-wise. I understand, it's,
I don't
the
know how you
logic
do that,
isn't-
I just can't comprehend.
The
how you
logic
do
doesn't
that.
The same way you do a
always hold up, but
comprehensive
that was what it was.
It was
wasn't an oversight.
aspirational.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's as good as, you know, no stop.
But maybe we build on what we're
That's
doing
done.
today to put these two
Right.
pieces together.
Yeah.
You know, maybe this
Yeah,
is,
okay.
this is
And
where
the focus
people
of the
expect that.
people who are in the trust now to make a commitment to, you know, is the new trust, is this trust gonna be much more dedicated to raising funds or to, you know, there are all kinds of options, we haven't gotten there yet.
But it goes way beyond the trust, but yes, we all have to. I mean, this whole town, and we're gonna hopefully get a lot more people involved, right?
But
Because
again,
really,
we have
Andrew,
models.
This is huge. I
But
mean, I know, I agree.
There are
I hear you.
models in Martha's Vineyard in terms of how they leverage investment, and Nantucket.
This is big.
There are, but Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket are great to look at in terms of how their programs are structured and what they're doing that's innovative, but their resources are exponentially greater than ours. So I just warn that when we talk about those two towns
So
in
if you
particular.
did a workshop on finances, a little secret about the Cape is a lot of the money that's raised for great causes like Preservation Hall or cultural centers is by second homeowners who want
Right.
to see the community change. And we have never engaged that part of the community on this board.
That's a very good point.
So that, again, if you decide to put finances into your goals, you organize differently your work.
The angle I was coming from is I don't like being held accountable to a goal that to me is half-baked. That's just my take.
The housing
That's
plan
referred
is
to
the
the
select board.
Ramsey's unfunded mandate,
Right,
make bricks with no straw.
right.
Well, it's kind of like, you know, sitting at home and saying, let's make a list of all the places we'd love to travel to. And you're able to do that for different reasons. Then you talk about, all right, how do we save the money to do it? And which is a priority?
Yeah.
Because I think you
Exactly
can
right.
do one first and then dig into, okay, how do we make that happen financially?
Well, Susan, I hear you. However, this was put together how many years ago?
2019.
Well,
Okay.
that was
The
general
vision, the
statement.
plan itself was 2023.
Yeah.
2024.
It's now 2026, and I haven't read one thing with numbers to support any of
Well,
this.
there
Well, I
hasn't been
think-
There are no
any
Yeah.
drive to do that.
If we
Now
start
there
going
is,
through
but you know what,
I'm sorry, I'm just bringing it up.
I'm just trying to say, in 2023 and 2024 and half of 2025, if you raised that subject, it was beaten down. Or
Wait a minute, wait.
set aside rather than beaten down.
Except that the way the
So
town
it's
could
irrelevant.
afford to work to address this plan was by making development possible but not paying for it. So we invested in sewer, we invested in economic development issues, we invested in the kind of setting the table, hoping the developers would not only come in and build the projects, but they would make a living, a livable, sustained presence that they could afford to keep those units running. We didn't envision, I think much to Fran's point of view, that the work of our tax dollars is to pay our way, to tax all of ourselves out of this, because it would never work. So one of the reasons you've never seen a budget is because it's had to be project to project to project.
I hear what you're saying. I have a little different thought process there.
Good,
Let's
change it.
Let's move on though.
Well, no, I mean, I do think it's important, and I don't have a slide on this, but I think it's important to talk about that, you know, the trust is has historically been one piece of the puzzle, and we have made big strides, even in the 2 years I've been here, to expand the opportunities for housing. So we passed that new downtown housing overlay district, exactly on that idea that, we were paying a significant amount of money per unit as a town to be able to incentivize residential growth in this community. What else could we be doing from a planning, policy, and zoning perspective to activate the private market so we don't have to subsidize every single unit that comes out of the ground? So when we talk about subsidy, I don't think, in these three, you'll see in our action plan, our strategies are not just funding programs, but they are also ensuring that we have a regulatory environment that does encourage people to make private investment. I think there is a market out there. I think we have a lot of challenges. I think we have, scarcity of land and ridiculously high land values. And I think with some tweaks, we will have a zoning ordinance that'll hopefully, meet the vision here of having well-designed residential development that can happen and be profitable for the private sector to provide. So we made a big step. We took a big step forward at Fall Town Meeting. Not to, I think, take some of the pressure off the trust and hopefully create some opportunity in the private market.
And if you
to be
look
able to
at
move forward.
how
That's well
housing
said.
is built regionally, and how we wanted it to fit into the character of the community, what pays is those very big developments. That's how you lower the per unit cost.
Yeah.
Those really big developments were
Yeah.
pushed back against because many people didn't want big box housing units in the town.
Right.
And so then you're into okay, how do we pay for units that are embedded and scaled, like 107 Main, into neighborhoods? And those production costs can be higher. And then the other thing that we haven't talked about, but at One Cape was presented year after year, is the ADUs. And at one point, One Cape said, after those of us involved at a state level training said there's no way financially out of this except in these large, 100+ unit buildings. Oh no, we're going to ADU our way out of this problem. And here are the designs that the Cape Cod Commission is going to put forward. Were you in that discussion?
Probably.
Well,
yeah.
anyway, we're going to pre-approve
Oh,
these
right.
designs and make them available on our website. So if you have a developer who even wants to build ADUs or cottage communities, you can just go build these things straight out of the box and shorten your permitting timeline because you're going to fly through. All you have to do is find the land to redevelop.
Well, again, I think that'd be a great reason to have the commission to come in, because I know they did a
Right.
lot of work on that, and that never got off the ground.
No.
So what are the barriers to having some of these good ideas going forward? But yeah, let's dig into the strategies. And, I think we all know the needs out there are so varied and so broad and so deep. There's not going to be one strategy that solves all of this. There is no housing, there is no housing silver bullet out there. It's all these things. So again, the plan that was done in 2023 is divided up into these three categories. I went through and I highlighted where the Affordable Housing Trust was identified, or the committee was identified as a primary party in charge of implementing. But, again, I think it's good just to at least acknowledge all of these other ones and the progress we have made on them. So unless we want to frame, I'll just jump in and we can start walking
Yeah,
through
through each one.
these. Does this make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
You included, again, just so I heard you, the
Yeah.
Affordable Housing Trust and the now defunct committees.
Yes.
Action items.
So I just literally highlighted those, you'll see here, going through.
And honestly, the reason we haven't convened this board is because the select board didn't convene. I think that needs to be said. To your answer, I haven't heard any of this moving forward, we don't know anything about it. The select board let leadership fall onto your boards, and so I think to
Did
Elizabeth's
somebody correct
credit.
that to us? though?
Sorry?
I've never heard that said before.
No, well, it's not said, but Elizabeth has kind of, as the go-between among these essential boards, has taken on and gotten so much of this done in the leadership vacuum. And throw me out of office for saying it, but that's what happened.
Okay, so yeah, we can talk about, again, what the plan is. So everything on this sheet,
Oh, you're ready to.
I know, I'm so,
so everything on this sheet falls under the category of housing production. How do we amend our regulatory framework, namely our zoning bylaws, to incentivize the development of our missing middle housing types, so everything from a duplex to a small apartment building, and also reflects the growth strategy that's set out in our local comprehensive plan, in terms of directing that new growth and production into our downtown, into our village center, and areas that are served by public sewer. So I have to say, the first one here, and I do hope that the trust will be involved in this going forward, is, we have sort of two pathways to build housing under our zoning ordinance now. The pathway that was there when I came in, and the pathway we created, which is our downtown housing overlay district. They both have implications. They both say you have to provide a certain percentage of your units as affordable in here. We should be testing that to make sure that that works. There's a lot of people that are interested right now, and I'm having a lot of conversations about, if you have to do 1 in every 10 units affordable, am I just going to do a 9-unit project? Does that make a 12-unit project uneconomic? So we sort of skipped this step, but I do think, looking at those policies, the inclusionary zoning policy that says you have to have, so many units in your private development be affordable, will be something that the trust will play a role in. Yeah, right now we have that RFP out that says we're willing to fund or buy down projects, units in projects to make them affordable. How are we going to look at units that are required? How are we going to look at funding additional units? We sort of pulled that $10,000, $100,000 out of a hat based on review of other groups, but I really think that we should put a little bit of energy into financial feasibility. What does it cost on a homeownership project? What does it cost on a rental project to really incorporate affordable units into these types of developments?
Put the stars all around that.
yeah, I
That's
was
a
gonna
big
say,
one.
can you track, when Elizabeth makes a recommendation, can then we
Yes,
track it
I
and
brought a
consider
whiteboard,
it?
but yes, and obviously we can come back and,
That's a big one.
I'll come back and, okay, good, all right.
So, we have an RFP out for developers to try and interest them in building along Route 6A and downtown.
Yeah.
Right? But we really haven't had much response, is that correct?
So I will say that we've had some response. We've had a lot of kicking tires. A lot of people trying to figure out what the ordinance says, how to make it work, what does this mean, like how does it apply? I don't know if we've had a couple of, I permitted this under the old ordinance, what new opportunity, might I have under the new one? And we haven't marketed it. Like, we are working with the planning board on essentially I don't want to say pre-approved, but drafted designs for the types of building and development that we want to see happen under the ordinance. So I think once we have that in hand, which will be next month, like, we can start to go through a process where we more actively try to outreach to folks in the lower and outer Cape to take advantage of the ordinance.
So if you're interested, that kind of ZBA process is gonna be live and in person on May 20th. Do you have a time? when the Governor Prince project?
So I mean, no, Governor Prince is Governor Prince is the old way, that's like the old way.
But-
Like, this is what we're trying to get out of doing, are these very time and regulatory intensive projects where they're skirting around our local zoning because it doesn't work, so.
But they have, yes,
So what's
but
the
you hear the
20?
excruciating detail and the fact that they're doing a comprehensive, a 10-year permit, isn't it?
No, so they're doing the permitting for all the local boards under a state statute.
But are they gonna come back for each phase?
No, they're
Right.
permitting all
And-
projects in one, all phases in one permit.
And that, I think it's a 10-year build that they're looking at. It's a long build period, isn't it?
It's not 10 years, but
It's
it's a
5?
long bill.
Okay, well, anyway, that's one end of the conversation. The other is Hadley Luddy's got office hours. So if you want to, they're just opportunities for you to be more
Can you explain
campaigning.
what the May 20th meeting is? I don't know what you're talking about.
So we will have that on our agenda at the next meeting, but the Governor Prince has filed their comprehensive permit application with the Zoning Board of Appeals. Their public hearing will open on May 20th at the ZBA, where the applicant will come and present that project to the zoning board and to all other boards. This board has received a notice to comment. We didn't have our last meeting, so we can talk about it at our next meeting, but the board has received essentially a notice to comment, as a funder of the project and a substantial project proponent. We would encourage you to weigh in to the zoning board, but a comprehensive
It's gonna be
permit,
here, I'm sorry.
correct, at
You know,
7 o'clock on
7
May
o'clock.
20th. But yes,
It's
so
just
they
for
are
them to
going
see the
through,
process.
so,
If they've never seen the process.
yeah, I mean, again,
You can watch it on
think-
TV.
and again, like separately from what we're talking about here, like this is creating a streamlined by local process where somebody could come in, say, I want to develop a small scale, missing middle type of development, and come in, get site plan review, get design review, and get a building permit. Like
Right.
that is the aim through this. Comprehensive permit is the complete other end of that spectrum. They're looking to waive local zoning, they're going through.
It's how Fair got built.
It's how Fair got built, it's how 107 Main Street got built, but it is a multi-year process, that typically requires lots of outside funding. This is really aimed at how do we create a local process that's more streamlined to be able to, again, allow the market to act on its own without as much
This is the
government
antidote to what you'll
intervention.
see on May 20th.
Yes.
Yeah.
And does that reduce the
Yes,
cost per
cost.
unit by measurable?
It
Yes,
reduces
I would say
all the
yes.
soft costs
Okay.
of getting anything built. And the number of months that you're tied up in those soft costs before you can break ground.
As a sidebar, is there with this, cost per unit, is there any standard typical breakdown of what's in all those costs? So you can look at it and say, well, where is there potential
Yes.
savings,
Yeah,
so to speak?
and I know you guys have been asking to do this,
We
we
don't-
can
we don't have to
do,
get- dwell off
yeah,
on
we
that.
can do a
Just a-
separate workshop on affordable housing financing, and then just like, not affordable, like regular housing financing and how
I
that
think-
changes. I am not the expert on that, but we can, and it's definitely part of this financial viability conversation as well, and I think those two things will go really nicely together.
Regarding this very first action step, have we received input from developers regarding this vision?
I mean, on a small scale, yes. So you mean on the sort of financial feasibility?
Right, the attractiveness of, development in this
Right.
area.
So we know there are barriers. Like I have groups that we've worked with here that I know we're very interested in developing, but not a lot of properties on the market. And when you look at the properties that are on the market, they are extremely expensive. Extremely expensive. So what are our other options to try to buy down those development costs, absent of going through the Governor Prince process, where we buy the property as the town put out an RFP and end up with another, low-income housing tax credit project. So we're trying to develop these new models going forward that, that's a very traditional way. I'm not saying it's a bad way of doing it, but it's incredibly in time and resource intensive from the town perspective, so.
So that was, I'm sorry if I'm being,
No, please, that's why we're here.
I'm thinking about Route 6A and that old gas station kind of place, right, near,
Staples?
yeah. Is that property the kind of thing we'd be looking at as potential redevelopment in this new zoning that's possible?
Absolutely, I think we even did a little test fit that said, look at how this property could be redeveloped under our
Okay,
ordinance.
But
Yeah.
one of the problems is the cost of that stupid property.
I mean, maybe not that one in particular, but yes, the fact that there are limited opportunities, there are limited redevelopment opportunities, and for new folks to get involved, the cost of even the land is very, very high, much less
Gas stations
construction.
are tough too, Susan.
I
Gotta
know,
get tanks
the kind of
taken out.
ecological
Is the
or the-
land contaminated?
Right,
right.
That's a great, suggestion, but that's a tough one.
Yeah.
because-
It is.
But it's been done.
But,
It's
Yeah,
been done,
yeah.
because just opposite the hole-in-one, that was a gas station that we retired. George Meserve was instrumental in that, getting the tanks full. But the other thing about that is Todd Thayer had, and I don't know how many units were involved, he had a plan, and it was gorgeous for converting everything from the CVS all the way down through Staples Mall. And he would be a great person to talk to about the barriers, because he's been waiting to build housing. And why isn't it yet possible for him as a local developer, and he already owns the land?
And who's this, Andrew?
Todd Thayer, who owns Staples Plaza with partners.
to your point, Tom, that, in terms of money and what's needed and what needs to be raised and whatever capacity, if we had a vision for some very specific properties, I would say, okay, this is the amount we'd need to buy that property, let's say, then I think it'd be easier to generate some interest.
Can I pose an alternate, that getting involved with private property is a very different way to proceed, which is not a bad thing, but it's a different way to proceed than if somebody like the Chris at, I forget his last name, who came to us in the past and said, look, I can't make this work as affordable because things like sprinkler systems are killing me. Or sewer is killing me, the cost of this. And if the trust got involved, or I can't make, as you just talked about, I can't make that, I'm gonna build 9 units, which happened near Cedar Pond. That development was gonna be affordable, but it's not. If the trust was intimately in conversation and said, look, we can leverage this investment by taking care of those costs for you. And then our bargaining chip is gonna be deed restriction of some of your units. That's to me, a more sustainable and cost-effective way than going out and acquiring property. I'm not sure, I just don't know how the private market would deal with that. So you can develop a menu of these discrete assistance.
Right, and we sort of know. Look at what we did on 22 Old Tote, right?
Right.
We went out and bought essentially 22 Old Tote, and we gave it away for $1 in exchange for 4 units.
But that's the other thing, you have a family relationship. You become like a conservation trust, and you encourage, so that's advocacy, you encourage people to participate as being part of the solving of our crisis.
But you're working on this with Fran right now, right? How much land does this town own that we don't even really think about, that we might want to just put that list together?
Is that something that we can explore? And it may be 0, but could there be property that the town owns that is using in ways that underutilize the asset effectively, given our costs?
Yeah.
And how could we get that sort of an analysis started?
It's ongoing.
It is, but we
exist.
should definitely sit down as a
Yeah.
trust and have that conversation. I mean, obviously 44 Main Street is a part of that conversation. The Bay Ridge property is, you know, a great one, but for the fact it has no sewer.
Right.
The old DPW, you know, there are, what's the other one that's on the list perpetually? There's at least one other that the select board is part of the select board goals and priorities.
But and we
Um,
also own the Galligan Cottages, the
Cottages,
the Hubler
yeah.
Motel. We have seasonal worker housing issues. And is there some possibility there, and how do we invest in them, and what are the usage? For instance, if we look at very high desirable pieces of land that the town owns, and maybe think a different way to use them that creates money to invest in sewered areas of town. I mean, there are all kinds of
Well, yeah, there are all sorts of ways that you could sort of
slice and dice.
Yes.
think about this, but I guess the question then is, how do we get started on it? How can we make some real progress soon?
I would, you.
I would say, why don't we do a small group meeting
Okay.
with George, who knows the town better than anyone?
Okay.
And we can sort of look at that spectrum and then report out at a next meeting to the larger group.
Okay,
As well.
and I should probably, this may be my opening, but I think we should throw into that the emerging project with the fire rescue and the old site and what the plans are for that.
Demolition.
Well, which is, well.
We just
that-
voted it last night.
Well, that's not final. I spoke with Kevin, and he said this is not the end, you know, the end
No,
story.
no, no, that's just the planning is going forward
Exactly.
for it.
And the idea is that that will be demolished, there'll be some grading that goes on and become a big parking lot. And then there'll be some a little storage facility. Well, maybe there's another way to address the whole thing. And it's because I know that they did an analysis, they did sort of a back of the envelope, well, I wouldn't call it back of the envelope. They did some sort of analysis that put a $12 million cost to retain it for other uses. Well, when I posed the question, what other uses did you consider? Well, we really didn't have any.
No, that's not true.
Well, I
That's not
spoke
true.
with somebody from the town who said.
I'm from the town. There was a
I'm
plan.
telling you who I spoke with,
I know, but-
Andrea, so you gotta take my word for what
I
happened today.
I believe
Okay.
you, but there, you can go online and see, there was a community plan done for community center, school, and fire and rescue building.
There was
with that
never any
parcel.
discussion of affordable housing.
No, it's
No,
not.
because it's not sewered, Fran. Our commitment is to put to put all housing in Seward, because then we undo our progress to meet our commitments to the state by building housing in non-Seward areas.
Is the new facility gonna be sewered?
Not for years. We have to build septic to handle the needs of the fire station. So we're really focused on building housing where sewers already exist.
No, I just think it's unfortunate if that piece of land goes unused
It's
and.
not, it's not unused, it's general municipal as opposed to housing. It's recreation, it's school, and it's emergency services.
But I think the point is well taken, that when we're thinking about master planning property
Yes.
in the future, to ensure that housing is part of that.
It can be
Well,
embedded.
the thing is there should
Not
always
part of
be a
that
highest,
conversation.
best use
That's right.
analysis of a property.
Yeah.
And in that construct, there's a determination of whether housing is a consideration. But if you don't do the highest, best use analysis, and you just make decisions because
Randomly.
randomly,
Someone's got an
then
agenda,
you
right.
get a
Right.
problem.
Okay, well said. All right, where are we at here?
All right, so I do think we've made significant progress on these zoning amendments,
Yeah.
you know, on design guidelines and standards. You know, I think continuing to make sure the trust is part of the conversation, that as these projects come forward, looking at, you know, how we can play a role, you know, in ensuring that, you know, we're not just, and I think the zoning, you know, the new zoning puts protections on here, that we're not just encouraging seasonal housing, because the new zoning only allows year-round housing, but how do we encourage year-round and attainable housing, and what role does this group play? And I think that implementing the first step here. This sort of financial analysis is a big piece of that.
So there really, is there anything left to do with that second step? Or are we done with that?
I'm not gonna say the zoning is perfect, we will definitely need to
Revisit.
adjust it and revisit it over time, as I think you should any tool and technology that your town uses. I mean, it's not a knock on any of the amazing work that we did, but I would say largely, 2 and 4 on this sheet, I don't wanna say are completed, but we've made substantial progress on,
Substantial
yeah.
progress.
I mean, the seasonal worker employee housing, again, a priority, and that comes down, it's an issue, but again, it comes down to priority. Like, is this something we're gonna take on? Does another group take this on? We're already seeing the private sector start to address that in its own way.
Elizabeth, I have a question. In town meeting, there were several local architects who wanted to assist with the aging and growth of number 2 of the zoning amendments. Would they, if you wanted to ever hear from them about tweaks or growth of that, would they go to the planning board?
The planning board, I think the planning board, and the planning board, I think, is very open to having those conversations, and has even talked about, as we look at potentially bringing amendments forward at fall town meeting, bringing in ZBA and Architectural Review Committee into a joint meeting to hear that input.
And so
I think
for-
they've actually slated that for June.
Oh, that's great. So for housing people who are very interested in both understanding the barriers and how to work with our partners, is that something that we might be invited to become, just educationally? If we're not hosting it, can we participate if we want for our own education?
Certainly make you aware of that meeting and that as it moves forward. And we're going to talk about, hopefully, if not, we don't get into this meeting, at our next meeting, talk about roundtable to make sure that we have, again, that circle of communication going forward. So these 2 strategies, as opposed to the first set, these were sort of focus on the downtown area, focus on production, at a larger scale. There was also a strategy that acknowledges, how do we look at smaller homes in our residence districts, in our single family districts, that are not necessarily suited because they don't have the infrastructure or, I think, character to be able to accept that larger missing middle development, but how do we look at this going forward? I appreciate the comments on the open space residential development bylaw. I'm not sure, I will tell you right now, I don't think that's a priority for us. We don't do a lot of subdivision here, totally built out community, so. I would definitely put that as a long-term need and not something we should focus on. ADUs are the other one. I mean, that has been the big, I think, answer statewide. There are a lot of strategies to deal with this, whether it's changing minimum lot sizes or changing single-family zoning as a whole. But we've seen a ton of progress in the ADU framework. Again, this was done obviously before the Affordable Homes Act, and now we have a structure where we have a new category of protected use zoning statewide, which are 900 square foot accessory dwelling units. So
And our top scale for ADU is 1,200 square feet.
it's 1,200, yeah, exactly. So again, you can do under our ordinance, you can do a larger ADU. We don't have these smaller minimum lot size requirements, those were already nixed. And again, anybody can do a 900 square foot
To
ADU.
tie into Fran's concern, when we have future phasing of sewer, like South Orleans is going to have sewer down around the general store. And so when we talk about where is it smart for this group to invest in, we may want to, and again, the roundtable would help us to stay informed, but we may want to be able to start beginning planning for opportunities and talk to landowners and look at reuse in places that aren't downtown.
Right. Maybe not as much South Orleans, but I mean, there's been a lot of conversation about the East Orleans Business District,
That's right.
how to bring that back to life a little bit, and there's nothing that I think, personally, that I think is more effective to revitalize a business district than to add housing, year-round housing, to get people to actually live there and patronize those businesses. So, I mean, it's a different and I think more selective and careful conversation that you have when you're dealing in a single-family residential neighborhood, but We do have a small business district there that is sewered. You know, we do have a lot of large and historic homes there that, you know, could potentially accommodate additional housing opportunity.
The old funeral
on
home
sewer.
has how many condos in it? Do you know about that?
The funeral home.
Yeah. As you drive, it's right before the market. It's a beautiful old white
What are you
home
talking about?
in East Orleans. It's an old funeral home.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, sure, yeah.
They're gorgeous condos.
Oh,
in
yeah,
there.
they're really nice, yeah.
And it's like, wow, what a great use.
So how do we
use of
think
the
about
building.
opportunities that are very consistent with the character of a residential neighborhood that are now available because of the ability of sewer?
I
And,
forgot that was a few.
Yeah.
and I, you know, 101 Drive on Main Street is an amazing example of that, right? How do you take that sort of smaller scale residential style development and integrate it into a neighborhood?
So are there really any zoning barriers to developing ADUs right now?
No.
So
I would
that's-
say that, you know, the developers tend to be on, the barriers tend to be on the wastewater side, because you still have to comply with Title V if you're not on sewer, right?
And
But
how many ADUs do we have in town? There aren't many, are there?
we're doing a good clip.
Really?
We did 10 last year, and I was talking to George, because he signed off on them. He thinks he signed off on at least 10 this year. So we're making
Wow.
amazing progress.
great.
And I don't remember, is there any restriction on how they can be used? Most people just build them and they put their family in it.
So you can put there's the restriction that's written into our local bylaw is they cannot be rented for less than 3 months. The restriction statewide is they cannot be short-term rented. So there's been a lot of conversation about whether, under the new seasonal communities framework, we can require them to be year-round, but we have a AG-approved bylaw that says they cannot be rented for, if they are rented, they have to be rented for more than 3 months
But
at a
they
time.
have to be rented.
No,
You can't,
no, they don't have to be
see, that's
rented.
the.
Well, I mean, you probably should not be condoing a single-family property. I'm not saying people don't do it.
But you don't have to rent them, you can use it for your own private use, like.
Or
a
you could
kid
rent it to
or-
your family, right,
Yeah,
yes,
no,
you
they
could
don't
rent
have
it
to
to
be
your
rented.
family. I think most of the ADUs that we see are family situations.
So how do we think about this step in terms of our overall goal of 350 and 150? I mean, do some of these ADUs, do we track how much rent they are asking and whether that's kind of affordable?
So
or
we
more-
don't track that, we don't track the rent, we do track the production, we're required to track the production, under the Affordable Homes Act. So yes, I mean, I think they definitely count as new units, that are in there. Again, the assumption is these are not seasonal housing units. I mean, there are, and I know this is one of our strategies here, but we'll get to it now since we're talking about it. You know, how do we leverage this interest in ADUs, and is there a way of potentially looking at incentivizing property owners to create them and then to rent them at affordable rates? So I came from Barnstable. We had, before ADUs were the craze, you know, we had an ADU program where you could permit a second dwelling unit on your property if you rented it at an affordable rate.
Did you have to deed restrict it?
You had to deed restrict it.
So that's the other, to your question, Susan, does it count on our inventory if it's deed?
So Barnstable has a special waiver to count their units. I don't think we could get that today. I'm not saying it's not possible. Wellfleet Affordable Housing Trust runs a long-term loan, forgivable loan, 30-year forgivable loan program for ADUs that,
In terms of building them or?
So yeah, they will essentially, give and I forget what the amount is, but give a forgivable loan to a homeowner if they agree to place a deed restriction on the
Interesting.
property. We could certainly look at something like that. People don't love encumbrances on their property, so we have to think about the grant versus loan. And a lot of people who do ADUs do it for family reasons. And if we get involved and require a deed restriction, then we also have to require that those units be affirmatively fair, that we that there's a lottery process.
I see.
And that, you know, that becomes an issue with homeowners sometimes. So I'm not saying that, so yes, we should look at it, but I think this is one, you know, where we should think about, are we requiring these to be affordable, or should we use our other funding, our other resources, you know, our year-round housing resources to be able to fund this, to look at encouraging other opportunities for ADUs. Okay, so ADUs, great strategy, again, something I think we should keep on the table in terms of thinking about how we promote that. Okay, so those are smaller homes in the residence district. So this is under the category, create and preserve more deed-restricted affordable housing serving low-income households. So this is our traditional capital A affordable housing. That's really, you know, the bread and butter, I think, of the trust and why you see them supported here. I'm not entirely sure what they were aiming at with this first one. Consider supporting private development through the state's local initiative program and local action units. So, you know, that again is the friendly 40B process like we did for Governor Prince. That is, you know, inclusionary units or units that would otherwise be required by local zoning but not a other state program. I think it's just a kind of a good to have that we do that in here. I don't think there's any specific action tied to it. You know, that the acquire and rehabilitate substandard housing, such as foreclosed and older homes, to create deed-restricted ownership housing as desirable opportunities arise. Establish a process for the trust to review tax foreclosed property lists regularly.
That's good. There are,
And this is
Really good idea.
yeah.
okay. This is not something that we've been doing. I know that every once in a while one will come up and somebody will come into my office and they'll say, I heard about a property that, you know, so if this is something that we want to do, again, I think we should have a follow-up, you know, small group meeting, talk about how we do this. So if, you know, if we do want to pursue something like this, and again, this is where the sort of cost per unit comes in, like, you're gonna spend a lot of time, it's gonna be more time intensive and more expensive to focus on individual single family homes and their subsequent rehab, you know, than it is to look at some of these bigger
So you-
projects, so.
Sorry, would you be willing to qualify that in sewered areas so that we don't undermine, and that's just a question for your future meeting. The other one is the town has been, the select board does review properties when they come up, and often there are entanglements like, you know, the state or the federal government has tax liens against those properties, and so getting involved and acquiring them would be so legally expensive for the town. In the past, we've backed off. So I know as this conversation proceeds, you will refine what makes a desirable property for this board.
So Andrew, I'm just gonna throw out to you, back in Western Mass, I worked with a partner that we used to get homes that had a significant amount of tax dollars owed.
Yeah.
The city of Springfield would waive all those taxes. Why? Because we'd go in, refurbish the home.
Right.
And then they would get all this new increased revenue.
The town has done similar
moving
things.
forward. And it was a win-win deal, okay.
Yes,
so-
no, we know that that's a tool. It's
I'm not,
just-
yeah, I mean, it's not a tool that's used frequently. I would tell you,
Right.
this is not a tool that's used frequently
I think this is
on the
what we
case.
have to-
Yeah.
By way of example, in a sewered area, and I'm talking about rehabilitate, you know,
Yeah.
like substandard housing or whatever, we have two properties almost directly across the street from each other. I'm sure the land is privately owned, but you have Yak Arts and you have the old Binnacle.
The Binnacle is owned, there are plans for that. Again, they've, like
Okay,
Todd's,
okay.
they've not had, but the other, Yak Arts, is for sale in the open market. And the town did review that and decided not to touch it. That's as much as I can say about that.
The town reviewed it? I mean,
The select
who was
board,
that?
the opportunity was considered by the
God
select board.
ruled?
Sorry? No.
So again,
I'm
I think
just
this is
saying
the,
it's
going back to
confidential
Fran's
information.
comment, that as these conversations happen, like engaging the trust in these
Instead would
conversations,
be great.
understanding that that would be a priority, you know, and I think
Right.
as the trust making a statement that, hey, you know, these are our priorities in terms of land acquisition. When we do see a property that comes up for sale, like, let's make sure we're reviewing it, you
Yeah, I
know,
mean-
against these metrics that we have.
I think that it is what we're asking for, or at least what I'm asking for, and I think we are, is a seat at the table when those discussions are had.
Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because it
Just
just seems
give us
like we
consideration.
operate in
No,
such
no,
a
no, but
vacuum.
it's fine, and if the trust had, if the select board had wanted to pursue it, remember, the way the trust was formed is that the select board and the trust are partners into town meeting on property
In
acquisition.
theory.
No, in fact, all the projects that we have looked at, that Elizabeth cited at the beginning of this meeting, it didn't matter whether the land, the idea of purchasing originated with the trust or with the select board. We're bound to be partners in every single project.
I
You have to
understand, but
be,
I'm just gonna
right.
use with
The way
and
the
I may be
bylaws are.
totally wrong here, and if I am, I beg your apology, or your forgiveness. But, just using the Yak Arts as an example, there was a discussion that was had as to its highest and best use, or is it relevant?
No.
But, was anybody from the trust
Don't claim
have a seat
victim
at the
status.
table?
No,
I'm
not
not,
in that
I don't mean it
discussion.
that way, I'm just
Not in that
asking it.
discussion, the
Okay.
way that, again,
Just my
the
example.
way properties have come, but this is what the round table, I believe that if we get everybody in the same conversation, but understanding that in the history of this town, the same way, the thing that's on the warrant right now didn't come to you guys first to say, you know, half of the .48 acres didn't come to the housing trust first, because it was project-based. We can change how we've done business, but until we put that forward, it won't change. So if this group says we have our eyes on a property, the same way open space says we have our eyes on a property, there is a process by which that discussion then continues. If a group says we're not interested in this property, there's no reason to bring it. If the select board hears about it first, there's no reason to bring it to the trust because the select board doesn't want to participate. It takes two, right?
But I think it should be an open discussion, Andrea. I
But
think
it,
that-
but there are reasons why
It can't be.
it can't be. There are open meeting law reasons where privacy is protected.
But we could go private, and just say we're in a closed
We
session.
can hold it, we've done joint meetings and executive sessions.
That's right, but you
Yeah.
have to have something to bubble up to make that worthy. And if
Yeah.
something's ruled out, it's not gonna bubble up.
I mean, so I think, you know, as a way to sort of integrate these perspectives, you know, the trust having very clear land acquisition priorities.
Yes.
You know, here are the types of properties, if they were to become available, you know, that we would absolutely most want to put resources into, so that is communicated to the select board. So if they independently see one of these come forward, at least there is, you know, the ability to, they recognize that that's a trust priority. I know the town manager has been talking about drafting sort of land acquisition priorities on her own, and as that process goes forward, I can, you know, report back and obviously be a voice for the trust in that process.
Along those lines, this whole thing about open space, which we've sort of talked about,
Yeah.
touched on a few times, and it's only natural that conservation is way ahead in terms of cultivating potential donors of land to retain open space. Because, you know, affordable housing is relatively new in the history of the town and these processes. But now we're at a point where maybe a civic-minded individual, when reminded that there are critical needs for land use for housing, might maybe give some serious thought to making a contribution of land, not to conservation, but to affordable housing, or B, explore a kind of a hybrid solution where that piece of land might be able to satisfy both.
And get a tax benefit maybe in the bargain.
Well, there's some other things that, that sort of fly out of that,
Yeah,
but.
we can do it.
So anyway,
Just
all I'm
information
saying is that, but we have to really, talk with the people who are actively cultivating givers, donors for open space. And we have to have the endorsement of the town that we want a place at the table about developing a message that covers both. And then we would set Susan loose in terms of her education initiatives to talk specifically about this and remind people that there is a civic need for land for affordable housing as well as simply to never be used again.
And I would say, don't even wait to be invited. You could develop the campaign that says this is what we are interested in
We're not in
doing.
a position to see any of this.
Yeah, you are.
No, we're not in a position to see what's on the, what is sort of like, that people are working on, or maybe having casual conversations with the town about.
You're in a position to initiate an invitation and to say, up through the pipe stream, the Affordable Housing Trust is actively seeking properties for redevelopment with the priority of housing. Why not? And then invite the select board in to join you in that message. They sign off on it and you go.
Well, that's fine, but as I say, we also, I think we have to embark on a little bit of a diplomatic
Yeah.
journey here to make the people in conservation not feel a little put out because we're trying to take something from them or to
It's different
grab
property.
potential donors or take them away. And believe me, I've been involved in fundraising at endowment level, and that is a fact of life among people who are fundraisers. Don't take my donor because your need, suddenly lands in front of me. So all I'm saying is that, and maybe I think what you're saying is right, that we do have to have a conversation with people in the select board and say, look, if these things are coming to you, or if discussions are about to take place, they're being brought to you, we would like a process whereby the potential donors are advised that, there's a broader set of needs that you'd like to be able to help. And maybe think about one or the other and not let anybody feel threatened or make us look like we're kind of careening about out of control and getting in people's way.
So is the summary here that we're whinging about our lack of access? And what you're saying,
Just get it.
and what you're saying is, we simply don't do that, we simply haven't acted on
You haven't
our
developed your own
mandate.
plans
Right.
and priorities.
Okay, so.
As
there
soon
we
as
go.
you do, people will be happy to partner with you.
Okay.
My husband's
Yes,
been
thank
on
you for
the,
reinterpreting.
my husband's been on the Orleans Conservation Trust for years. He's about to come off. We have these conversations all the time. But of course, one of the things they have going for them is that if someone is going to donate a piece of land, there are financial,
Absolutely. But-
there are perks for
But just think about it
someone.
logistically. No one from open space is gonna invite affordable housing in as a consideration or alternative.
But think about the
For
priority of
property.
infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to build, there are a handful of properties, and George can tell you about it. There are a handful of properties,
Yeah.
mostly in South Orleans, that are greater than an acre. Like there are a couple of bigger properties that could be subdivided. We don't want to build housing down in South Orleans. There's no sewer, it's away from services, transportation is hard. The people who need that housing or want that housing aren't going to be near, walkable community. They're going to be car dependent. And so whether you're a kid trying to get to school or you're a senior trying to walk to the grocery store from Center Place, right behind Friends, it's not strategically smart. But if there was a large parcel a large parcel, the idea like they used in Nantucket to subdivide into retaining open space and build on the peripheral edge of it to cluster housing,
Yeah.
why not discuss it?
Well, there was also another possibility is, based on what you're saying, that it's not really an ideal place for
Yeah.
development because it's not sewer service. But if a piece of property came up and someone was, as I say, inspired to make a contribution to the town, well, we could sell that piece of property, let somebody else develop it, use the cash, and
That's right.
fund our other projects.
That's right, that's
So,
right.
so it's all fungible to me that somebody wants to sell something here or there, but if we're included on the receiving end of a donation, as I say, I think it's a big deal for somebody to take a piece of property and give it away, or put it in their estate and have it moved to us as a beneficiary, but
I'm sorry, one of my frustrations has been, I had a seasonal resident come to me and say, I've got $50,000 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago. I would like to impact housing here because I recognize, even though I'm very well heeled, I recognize this is a problem. How can I help in my community where I spend the summers? And I couldn't advise them to invest because we didn't have a plan to invest in. They wanted to know what tangible project, what would their money get them? And the trust was brand new. The trust didn't have, if you've been in development, that's what we need. And I sent them to the CDP because the CDP had projects that they could invest in. And that, I was not happy about that. But again, it takes time. We need to be, as you said, when we're the age of the Conservation Trust or the commission, we'll be more sophisticated, right?
Okay, I think that.
I'm gonna go to Old Kings Highway, which also has restrictions about development because it's a historic district.
Okay,
So,
Okay.
let's take a 2-minute time out here, just, I told you this is exactly what was gonna happen, right? So, do we wanna just, is this a good break point, or would you like to go on a little bit longer? Because I really wanted to talk about the roundtable, but it's almost 10 of 6.
We have a hard stop at 6:15 because of whatever comes in here next.
Okay, well, I was hoping to finish by 6 because, but I'll gladly go to 6:15 if everybody else will, but my thinking is that we're at a pretty good break point here, and just carry on at our next meeting. Don't change your agenda, everything you listed.
Yeah?
I want to get into the roundtable, but I don't want to cheat that very, very important topic.
Yeah.
Do you have a few more points that you wanted to cover right here?
I was just trying, under trying to summarize visually the conversation we had about land acquisition and how we put our heads around that. If this is something that we're going to pursue as a strategy, whether it's acquire an individual single-family home or try to play a role in a larger, process where that gets donated, I think we go through a process where we establish those priorities. Are we aiming for the single-family home? Are we aiming for the single-family home on sewer? Are we aiming for something that looks like Yak Arts? Like, with $2 million in our pocket, like, where do we spend that money? If acquisition of a single-family home, even a foreclosed one, is $500,000. So I think we have to really think about our priority connected with our budget. It's easy to put these all out on the table, right? But this is, it all takes a lot of time. It's also, are we ready to act when the opportunity comes up? So I think we got to balance those two things. So we established some priorities. There's an internal and potentially an external process to market that interest and that priority once we have it. Again, making sure we have a seat at the table internally when these conversations happen, or building relationships and partnerships and being able to broadcast to our community that this is an opportunity. This is something that you should be thinking about, not just, donation of property for open space, but donation of property for affordable housing. Chatham has a whole program. It's not unheard of. It's not unheard of.
quick, can I just ask, you say have the whole program, you mean to manage the touch points of potential donors for both interests simultaneously?
So Chatham has had 3 or 4 properties that have been donated to the Affordable Housing Trust, that they then they do some rehabilitation, and so then they have 2 options, right? They either hold them and they rent them to folks who could potentially be first-time home buyers in Chatham, or they flip them and they sell them with affordable deed restrictions. So, I mean, though, again, depending on the opportunity, I think, where would you want to go? Where's the
But
priority?
the development process, in other words, those, how are they identifying these possibilities, and are they competing with the open space people?
So I think, and again, I don't know, we could certainly have, I'm sure they'd become happy to come talk to us, and that's where these sort of like regional relationships come in,
Yeah.
right? I think somebody donated one, and then once they had that, they sort of built an idea around it, that they would rent it. So what they do is, I think they rent it to an eligible family, and then the rent that they pay, they match that and essentially escrow it as a down payment for that family. So if they can find an opportunity to buy a house, either one that the town acquires and rehabs, or on the private market, they have like a matching down payment program.
And
So.
Elizabeth, do you know if there was a whole separate group in addition to the Affordable Trust that sought
trust-
out donated properties,
No, again, I think they got one, and that sort of,
The kind of word of mouth and.
exactly,
yeah.
it sort of
So they didn't
encouraged
need to set
others.
up a whole separate
to apply.
nonprofit little thing.
The housing authority plays a role, I know, too, I think in owning and managing the properties, so I think it's a joint housing authority,
Okay.
town of Chatham.
That's
Do you have
project.
a contact
Yep.
there that I could
Yep, yes,
visit them?
yeah. I was actually, yes, talking to I was in a meeting where the woman from Chatham Housing Authority was there, and she said, if anybody ever wants to do a program like this, make sure you talk to me.
Yeah.
You understand all of
She
the
asked for it.
issues and implications.
It'd be great if she could come and talk to this group.
Yeah,
If she's willing to
absolutely.
do that, that'd be really interesting.
Let's get her here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could get her, that'd be great.
Yeah, we can do that.
So Elizabeth, again, I hate to,
No,
are you comfortable just pausing right now?
yeah, absolutely. We're gonna sort of move on to the other, another category of conversation here, so it's a good time to pause.
Well, no, here's what I'm thinking, it's almost 6, but based on how everybody feels, I was just gonna ask everybody for a few comments on how you felt today went. We're not gonna review the minutes. We agreed, Elizabeth and I, before, that we'll just do that at our next meeting, because this is really
And that's gonna be next Thursday?
the 19th.
Oh,
The
19th?
19th, that is our regularly scheduled meeting.
And Susan, but this is, again, Mallory, we all, this is, Elizabeth and I driving this home for the agenda was on training. Not to really be talking about, we had to bring Old Tolt Road up, and we, unfortunately, it didn't go on the agenda, but we really wanted it just to be a training agenda with not minutes, not, having to do the formal meeting. I really wanted to be just an executive session, be offline, but I was encouraged by certain people that, not to do that, so.
I think once you have a quorum, you gotta have a meeting.
Yeah, but we'll just call this the education meeting, and we'll continue it on the next one. But put Old Tote, we could talk about some of the projects going on for the next meeting, but I'd like to
Yeah,
really.
we need to talk about Old Toad and Governor Prince, but other than that, I think other things can wait, and we can continue this conversation.
I'm afraid I'm gonna be gone for the 19th. My son just had a baby, and
I
I'm
think it's
flying
very
out
good.
to see, yeah.
That's unacceptable, I mean.
I know. I'm a little worried to get on a plane again, but,
Drop
Oh,
everything.
gosh, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
you're driving, I hope? No?
yeah.
So just real quick, if we could just go around the room. Fran, any thoughts you'd like to add as Elizabeth's going to continue on with our training agenda here next week?
I
2 weeks,
just-
excuse
I
me.
guess you can tell I've been a little bit impatient about stuff we could sink our teeth into and make some progress on, whether it's property, promoting the idea of open space being considered in a different way. I'd like to maybe get a better feel. I was a little bit surprised, having talked with Kevin Galligan extensively, that the sewer issue is a total deal killer for the old property, the old fire rescue station. Like, is there some way around that? That's number 3. Anyway, but, so I guess I'm just sort of caught up in, you know, we're talking about organizing, but I really feel like there's stuff we could be doing at the same time.
Well said. I'd like to hopefully, after we get through the next meeting, hopefully we'll have some, little more direction for steps moving forward. I'm not trying to kick the can on that one. I really firmly believe that's why we put this kind of agenda together. And I'll stop there because I can go off on a tangent right now. Susan, anything you'd like to?
Just a couple things. One is to tag on to what you've said, because I think it's awkward to be an agency that is responsible for talking about funding projects without having any sense of what's happening behind the scenes around properties that might even be available, or, you know, how do we advocate for donations or more money from CDB if we don't even know what we're asking for? So I think it felt awkward to have Andrea talking about, you know, all yaks off the table, or that it just kind of felt like, well, how can we really do our work being so ignorant of what's even available? That was one thing. And the other is, and I don't mean to say this to make more work for you, Elizabeth, but maybe it would. I'd love to see us kind of take this plan and add on something which is a progress statement. Like for each of the things we've talked about already, what's happened already, what's done, so we can keep that in mind, not minutes for the meeting, but kind of recording what we've talked about.
You've done
I
a lot
did
of
start
that.
that, but we can append
Yeah,
that
she's
to
done it.
this,
That'd be
so we
great.
have a, let's say, like a working document that
Yeah.
we can keep coming back to.
Yeah, you've done a nice job with that.
That'd be
so-
great.
Anything else, Susan?
Scott, you're pondering.
I'm sorry, I'm just daydreaming. Look, I'm just happy that we are willing to become more activist. And that's what I think is required. All of these things just require our becoming more activist. And I think, and that's why I tried to summarize what Andrew was saying. It's not like we can't do these things. It's just that we've never screwed our focus to actually doing it. And this group seems to be animated enough to follow through and do that. So,
Howard?
Yeah, I think this was great. There are a few things, action steps would be great. I really liked your idea about the progress would be helpful. Action steps, what we can act on and reasonable timeframes. And really, really want to talk about housing roundtable. And as someone relatively new to the board, the big, I don't want to say concern, but I guess I still have a lot of questions around the year-round trust. And I was kind of curious if, when, and how we could have that conversation, or if it's even relevant to at this point, because I do have some questions/concerns about that.
Okay, yeah,
You want to go next, you want me to go?
go for it.
I had a real big aha today. I didn't realize Andrea, I love this woman. How many times she said about if it's not connected to the sewer, you can't, almost can't do it. There is so much land in this town that will not still be connected to the sewer. So next meeting, I'm going to certainly, or offline, have that discussion with her, because that just takes away an awful lot of opportunity for this group. So she caught me off guard. How many
well, I
times she
think the
brought
thing
that up.
is it's not like it's off the table. It's
Yeah.
that again, it's the priority.
Right.
If we say we're open to anything, then, that's a lot harder to manage than to say we're open to everything, but we're focusing on
Without-
downtown and sewer.
Yeah.
Without question, but
Okay.
again, everybody.
It's like, it's not that difficult.
Yeah.
Right. Goes back to my anal financial self here. We have a very aggressive 10-year plan. And I just want to keep that in the back of everybody's mind, okay? I'm sorry, I know I bring it up because you're probably sick of me saying it, but, and to answer all of
Creeping
your,
up on us.
to ask you guys at all your points, I'm chomping at the bit to get going. So just, let's, I raised my hand, I told people in the town, I told Alexis that I want to, and that's usually the normal follow, you guys gotta vote me in or out, but that's the normal process, how it works, right, is the chair, vice chair goes to chair. I definitely want to do that, right, so, just, I've talked to Kim about it the other day, am I crazy, didn't want to do it, given everything going on, but, and I'm hoping someone else, I know a couple of you said yes, a couple of you said, I've said, don't think so, not ready for that position yet, whatever, but I need to talk to a couple more of you, but think about, in June, we're gonna vote on what the team looks like going forward on July 1st, okay?
Something occurred to me. Every organization usually is resource stretched in some way, and then they work their way around by reallocating, we need to take so-and-so and put them over here and that kind of thing. We're having trouble getting members. I don't know whether Mike, the guy I thought was interested, is really going to be interested, unfortunately. But taking a step back, there's a bunch of commissions and committees with people sitting in them right now. I think people on, once again, select board, it's always easy to say, senior management could take care of this, select board, many of those people know of the people on these committees, have a sense of their abilities, their involvement, their investment of their time and energy. Would it make sense for someone to be approached on another committee and say, look, we need you? Well, your skills can be really, really used well if you come over to this committee. And would you consider doing that? And
That's how we got you, Fran. I guess how we got you, Fran.
But the point is that we're simply saying, look, we have to reorganize what we've got to our keenest needs,
Well said, Frank.
Well, I don't want to sound, I'll definitely sound like a broken record here. I couldn't agree with you more. But the issue to making that happen is for us to be clear about the profile or the skill set that we're looking for so we can go out and find it. We're just looking for bodies, and when you're just looking for bodies, you just get bodies.
Good point.
But if you're
Well
looking
said.
for somebody, a body that has financial, or a body that has this experience, or this perspective, or, that we have to define what we are looking for,
Yes, I
and
kind
then we
of-
can find them.
I kind of feel like we talked about this and then it fell off about what the criteria is we're looking for. And I think we
Yeah.
could get back to that and all these criteria keep coming up, but I think diversity and lived experience needs to be at the heart of our conversations, and it's not.
Yeah.
And it needs to be front and center at every meeting.
Yeah.
Maybe we could add in, talk about this some more,
Yeah.
that's a real good
Yeah.
one. All
I
right.
think it needs to be an agenda item that is discussed. It's part of the reason I decided to join a board or committee.
Yeah.
And the reality here is that I'm off the board in a year. What
too.
about you? You too. So, I've hit the limit of how long I've been on the board, so we're gonna have to recruit.
And again, I think that an architect, someone in finance, those are well and good, but that seems a bit elitist to me, and there is no criteria to be on a board or committee, so I feel like there's so many people in this town who have transferable skills, and that lived experience may trump someone who has a history in finance.
So we had Maria.
Well, look, I mean,
with-
that was just an example.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that
We
you're
have to be
suggesting
clear.
that.
I mean, but that said, I don't want somebody that's represented for their diversity if that's all they bring.
I don't think that would be the
I
case.
just, you know, maybe that makes me unpopular, but I just don't think that that's necessarily, you know,
Let's
it's
table
great,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but it, you know,
Let's
Well,
table this for.
you know, it
next-
used to be that there were enough people interested, like when I joined the board, I had to come and speak in front of the select board.
Right.
Because there were 4 of us who wanted the one position.
Yeah.
Right.
And we had to speak to things like, what kind of community do you want to live in? And what responsibility that,
Right, right.
well, that's
What
not the
happened?
case anymore, we don't have.
What happened? Why does no one want to be on the board?
So I didn't go, the
know.
chair meeting was what, yesterday? I didn't go to it. Alexis asked me if I wanted to go, and I just had stuff going on, but almost all the teams are looking for people, by the way.
Yeah.
of course.
So I don't know
Guys,
what's going
guys are
on
not
right
alone.
now.
I saw an ad in the paper for committees that were looking, and that's how I knew
Right.
I wanted to find out more and apply.
So
I don't
what-
see that anymore.
Let's talk some more at the next meeting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you guys, the open house meeting that we had, what, yesterday or 2 days
Yes.
ago?
Yes.
I talked to Kim, asked her if she had anybody that she would recommend. I talked to 3 selectmen, do they know of anybody? And next month, at this chairman's meeting, the chairs of each committee, I'm gonna go to that meeting and I'm gonna just say, hey, if you know of anybody, but I would love to have a profile or exactly what we're looking for, that I could just even just give everybody a piece of paper and say, you know, if you know of somebody who might fit this, what we're looking for, that would be great. And any ideas like that, I think we have to, because you're right, we have to do things a little bit differently about recruiting. Now, I didn't realize the 2 of you were gonna be gone in a year already, so I just renewed because mine was up, but I was shocked when she told me I got 3 more years.
You guys were technically
If I-
committee
if I
members
wanted
and
to-
now you're trust members.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
If you wanted to stay.
no, you know what, we're not
Oh,
off
no,
next
we
year.
start all over again?
We start all over again.
Oh, that's right, see that?
I don't know
The
about
clock
that.
is just.
But you know, it'd be, I don't know if we could ever get someone from like Hack to be on, well, they don't necessarily live, or CDP, you know, people who live in town, that's the tricky part.
When I was at CDP, they wouldn't let me. They said it was a conflict of
Yeah.
interest. You have to
Okay.
recuse
I was
yourself.
wondering why you didn't do that then.
Okay.
So that
That
was,
makes
CEO
sense.
wouldn't let me.
oh, okay.
Too bad.
Well, that kind of makes sense. I mean,
Yeah,
kind of.
it does.
But should there be other opportunities, like housing roundtable, as it's envisioned in, I think, in our 10-year housing plan, is not just internal, but should we be convening our external partners on at least an
Yeah.
annual
That
basis?
makes
And
sense.
meeting with HAC and CDP and the Housing Authority and other folks and talking about like, here's what we're gonna prioritize this year, what are you guys gonna prioritize this year, how do we work
So we
together?
do we know who's gonna actually convene this?
So we can convene, I can send the invitation out tomorrow, I just think I wanna be really clear if we, once we get this going, like, what does this first meeting look like? Like, what is our priority objective
I'd like to go
for?
back and find the Provincetown one. I think it was 2023 or 4, and I was there. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't remember when, but I'd like to try to find their agenda and see.
Okay.
I'd like to spend
I can ask,
a
yeah,
lot more
McKinley.
time on this though, next meeting,
Yeah.
if you
All
guys
right.
don't mind.
Yeah.
Thaddeus Soleil would be.
This is a very, very important topic, I think, so if we could just pause our thoughts, think about it, and we'll definitely, maybe even start off with this next week, because
Yeah.
it's such an important.
You
And I think that's my,
this is a
you know,
good-
my-
This is
my-
a good AI question.
Oh, please no.
Elizabeth, any additional comments you'd like to, the group?
No, I mean, this is amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I know we're like a couple days in
Thank you.
front of town meeting. We were supposed to have a meeting last week. Like I think one of the issues, and I think this goes to your comment, is that we as a town are trying to figure out like the role of having like new professional staff versus boards and committees that have driven a lot of these processes going forward. So your board is not alone, I think, in this time of transition and who plays what role in what responsibility. But I do think that, like, having worked with trust before, this is not, I can't carry this. There has to be leadership and advocacy and momentum on the trust part too. And I'll certainly do all the work to back up your ideas and your priorities.
Well,
So glad this is happening.
I'll leave it with this comment that You can't go anywhere, I'm just gonna tell you right now. We will hunt you down. We will- So, again, this is not a formal meeting. Do I have to close the meeting here?
You do, this is, so it's technically a meeting, so yes, we need to have a vote to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Second. I agree with that.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.